Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. You might have noticed by now a certain pattern emerging in America. Opposing a Democrat or Democrat policy, and you instantly become a criminal, a terrorist, a racist, or an insurrectionist. If you don't agree with your progressive school board, you're a domestic terrorist. If you're vaccine hesitant, then you're the cause of the entire pandemic. If you oppose the racialization of everything in America, it's because you're a white supremacist, and so it goes. The latest example of this, the Fraternal Order of Police has opposed Chicago's vaccine mandate, and the city required all officers to upload their vaccine status last Friday. The Fraternal Order of Police, headed by President John Canatizara, believing this to be medical tyranny and an invasion of privacy, has encouraged its officers to not comply. Now, due to this mandated vaccination policy, the Fraternal Order of Police has predicted that Chicago's police force would soon only be operating at about 50% capacity. Both the city and the Fraternal Order of Police are suing each other over the vaccine mandate, and the case is currently tied up in the courts. But opposing any Democrat or Democrat policy, as the story goes, these days anyway, including a vaccine mandate, and you can be sure that you will be called the worst names imaginable. And so Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot broke out her dictionary, and probably sensing that white supremacist, racist, and domestic terrorists were feeling a bit tired and overused, moved to insurrection in describing the Chicago police who are resisting the state, jabbing them without their consent. Watch.
What we've seen from the Fraternal Order of Police, and particularly the leadership, is a lot of misinformation, a lot of half-truths, and frankly flat-out lies in order to induce an insurrection. And we're not having that.
I guess insurrections take all forms nowadays. Now remember, the Democrats are supposedly the party of the workers. The Fraternal Order of Police are essentially a police union. Democrats are for unions, right? I guess apparently not when they're the police, and not when the police don't obey overreaching orders from the city of Chicago that violate a police officer's bodily autonomy and their right to privacy. Then the police become insurrectionists. Because again, this is how every disagreement goes with Democrats these days, because Democrats are uninterested in conversation, apparently not even with the police that protect them. They're interested in capitulation to their power, period. It's obey or be destroyed. Well, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, John Canatizara, is not backing down. Here he's speaking out about the mandates and Chicago's leadership. He's had a gag order since issued against him. Just also crazy. Watch.
It's safe to say the city of Chicago will have a police force at 50% or less for this weekend coming up. That is not because of the FOP. That is 100% because of the mayor's unwillingness to budge from her hard line. It's the city's clear attempt to force officers to Chicken Little, the sky is falling, into compliance. Do not fall for it. Hold the line.
Now remember, Lori Lightfoot is running perhaps the most crime-ridden city in America, and despite some of the toughest firearm laws, you had, because you know why, criminals don't follow laws, 22 people who were shot, 4 killed just last weekend, 644 shot and killed in Chicago year to date, and another 3,130 have been shot and wounded. So it almost seems suicidal to start against a war against your own police department over a vaccination that doesn't even stop the transmission of the virus, particularly when anyone who wants it can get it. But Lori Lightfoot apparently dislikes her own police. Remember, this is the defund the police Lori Lightfoot who declared racism to be a public health crisis, but not the slaughter of black youth that happens every single weekend in Chicago. This is the same Lori Lightfoot who advocated for the end of foot pursuits of certain misdemeanors of suspects by Chicago police. And Lori Lightfoot says that if officers don't uphold the law, meaning the vaccine mandate, there's no way to expect citizens to uphold laws. Here she's saying just that very thing. Watch.
Officers swear an oath to abide by the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, and the laws of this city. That is a sacred oath. That separates them from civilian employees everywhere. It's a sacred oath, and we expect them to abide by it. We can't expect them and residents to hold them with any degree of legitimacy if those who are sworn to uphold the law act as if they're above the law.
It's a really funny take from a mayor who can't even seem to abide by her own rules, like wearing that sacred and holy face panty that all Democrats wear proudly and obediently, even when they don't need it. The face blankie that we call a mask, right? I mean, she was actually not wearing one at a WNBA game most recently. Kids who are statistically safer than a vaccinated 40-year-old are forced to wear masks in Chicago schools every day, presumably to protect vaccinated adults. And in Chicago, you have to wear masks in every indoor setting. That's the rule, right? Not if you're Mayor Lori Lightfoot. She makes the rules. She doesn't have to follow them like you, the pores. You're the rubes. And it's not like Mayor Lori Lightfoot shuns wearing her mask once in a while. She does it like a lot. Let's take a look, because remember, Mayor Lightfoot is big on everyone following the rules now. Here's Lori Lightfoot during the height of the pandemic last year explaining why she didn't wear a mask and broke her quarantine when she got her haircut. Watch.
I'm out in the public eye, and you know, I'm a person who, I take my personal hygiene very seriously. As I said, I felt like I needed to have a haircut. I'm not able to do that myself, and so I got a haircut.
Yeah, because you all were apparently able to cut your own hair. See, Lori Lightfoot is big on the personal hygiene, okay? Not like you dirty rubes. She's in the public eye, unlike you, the pores. She needed a haircut to keep up appearances, unlike you, disheveled lot. She's not like you. She's important, so she can break the rules. Here's Lori Lightfoot on Sunday, hanging with the city's WNBA champs. No mask required. Not just in the locker room. Here's Lori Lightfoot. There she is, amongst a sea of people who are all wearing their face blankies. It's at the WNBA game. But not Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I mean, she is a public figure after all. She is a lord and ruler over all of us. And it's important that we see her face, and we can see that she has good hygiene on her face, the hygiene. Even though apparently there's like a very, 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 very deadly virus killing everyone out there on the loose. But back to the Fraternal Order of Police, who must abide by the rules even if the mayor doesn't. She says that they have to follow a law. Newsflash, this mandate doesn't have the force or full effect of law, so it is not a law. It isn't a law. It's just a press release. Rules are for regular people. So Lori Lightfoot is suing the Fraternal Order of Police for pushing back on an injection mandate that isn't a law. And now one of the reporters pointed out that there's been a much softer stance from Mayor Lori Lightfoot when it comes to not just haircuts, but Chicago's public school, also called CPS. Watch.
There is a different tone from CPS, from Pedro Martinez. He was asked, you know, what's going to happen to those who don't have their vaccines? And he said the other day, we're going to work with them. We're going to talk to them. We're going to make sure try to understand what's going on. So why a different tone for CPS than the police?
Well, I don't think there is a different tone for one versus the other. CEO Martinez has indicated that, and again, in agreement with the union, so that is one circumstantial difference, that every adult in the system has to be vaccinated.
Yes, here we even see the reporters noticing the city showing patience with the Chicago public school teachers that are vaccine hesitant. You hear language like, the city works with them and the city talks to them. See, the city works with teachers who are vaccine hesitant because probably those teachers just, donate a lot of money. While they sue and harass the ever-loving hell out of their own policemen and policewomen. So why the different approach? Oh, well, that's because schools do what Democrats tell them to do, because Chicago's public schools have been captured by Democrat-dominated unions, and they all donate a lot of money to Mayor Lori Lightfoot so she can go and get her haircuts and not wear a face panty. But see, the police, Lori Lightfoot hates the police. Why? Because when your progressive policies have destroyed your city, you have two choices: own your mistakes or change course, or blame the police who are overwhelmed by the crime in Chicago. Clearly, Lori Lightfoot is continuing to blame the police, as all Democrats have been doing since before even George Floyd's death. And maybe, I don't know, because it gets much easier, it gets the conversation off of them and their policies that ruin every big city and hurt the very people that they claim to at least want to help, the Black community. And in return, not surprisingly, the police very much dislike the Democrat Party, who was at one point the party of the working class, which includes police. Here's an image of what the police did when Lori Lightfoot spoke at Chicago Hospital on August 8th. Do you remember this? Because this is when a policewoman who had just returned from maternity leave was shot and killed by a repeat offender who, because they are always constantly letting people out on the streets with just a wrist slap. This was Ella French, and the police all turned their backs because Lori Lightfoot or is an immoral politician who cares only about herself and not her city, certainly not her police force. And when you have a city that's descended into pure violence, but you force a vax mandate that will potentially sideline 6,500 officers by putting them on paid leave, you wish for the destruction of your city. And this is a mayor that just doesn't really care about any lives, black or white. And when you have so many people, black men and women and children, every weekend in Chicago because of gang violence and drug violence, and there are black families that want to not be terrorized by crime either. The only thing that slows this loss of life down is more police, not fewer police on the streets. Here's a few images of the human toll when the safety of a community is sacrificed to politics. A tiny fraction of the hundreds who have been shot in Chicago for the past few years. There's no riots for these kids. You're not going to see any big Hollywood-backed groups organized for these kids. You're not going to hear BLM be out there for these kids. There's no memorial statue erected. They're not going to be invited. The families won't be invited to award shows. They won't be used as campaign fodder. No politician's going to pay a price. There's not going to be any accountability. Lori Lightfoot's going to keep her job, and she'll act like the virus and not wearing masks. That's the real threat to the average child in Chicago, and in fact, it's the violence that they can continue to perpetuate because of the judicial rot. And she'll continue to call her own police force insurrectionists for insisting on maintaining their bodily autonomy. And the party, Democrat Party, is not just running their cities into the ground, but they're quite literally killing the people in them to maintain power. And they're willing to slander and fire the only people who can, and I do stand in the gap, and at this point I question why anyone would want to, and that's the Chicago police. But when you dislike the police and you use them as your scapegoat, and you don't do anything to protect your children's lives, and you don't do anything to actually increase law and order in your city, something's terribly wrong. One final note, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago, John Canizara, he once posted this to his Facebook page. It's a picture of himself holding an American flag and a homemade sign that read, "I stand for the anthem. I love the flag and I support my president and the Second Amendment." Ironically, he was reprimanded for making what they called a political statement, because it's a political statement to say that you like your country and that you support things that are actually in the Constitution. These are the same people who only know how to play politics all the time. So perhaps this is partly explains why a judge threw a gag order on Canizara. And it also explains why the legacy media is in full assault mode, trashing him online despite his 23-year career as a Chicago police officer. Maybe it's also now clearer why Lightfoot says that he's inducing an insurrection. Is everything an insurrection? Like, I mean, for the love, if you stub your toe in your living room, is it an insurrection of your furniture? I'm so tired of people mindlessly using this term. But no, don't say that it's an insurrection when Democrats actually do bomb the Senate office like they did back in 1971, or when they were deciding to go and occupy offices. There was a bunch of lefty environmental protesters when they did that to Dianne Feinstein's office just a couple of years ago. No, don't ever use that word to describe that, because that only describes Republicans. No, it's an insurrection apparently to tell officers to push back on vaccine mandates, forcible injections. Because if you love America and the flag and the Second Amendment and back the blue, and you believe in antiquated notions like personal freedom, that makes you an insurrectionist according to Democrats, because Democrats are no longer interested in compromise or collaboration, or apparently live and let live. It's all about obedience. And if you do not obey, then you can be called all manner of names. And in the case of the Fraternal Order of Police there and the Chicago police, they're insurrectionists. All right, so coming up, we continue this conversation with police departments pushing back on these injection mandates with Tarrant County Sheriff. He's actually my sheriff, Bill Waybourn. Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the previous president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills that no one can pay for. It's time to take proactive steps to protect your wealth and your retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington continues to print money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information at legacypminvestments.com. So as vaccine mandate deadlines loom, more and more police departments are holding the line when it comes to their bodily autonomy because, I mean, why wouldn't, that's a very important issue to take a stand for. However, they face losing pay and pensions if they don't comply. So how is this going to end? Because it seems like this is the time we really, really need policing too, really good policing. Will leaders in some of these crime-ridden cities really actually sacrifice the citizens' safety for a mandate that doesn't have the full force and effect of the law? Joining me now to discuss, my sheriff. I like that I can actually bring on my sheriff, Tarrant County, Texas Sheriff Bill Waybourn. Sheriff, always so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you always, ma'am.
Of course. I gotta, because normally I know we talk about law and order, but now this is kind of, a law and order issue. And I know it's a concern of a lot of officers. And my stance has always been, if you want to get the jab, get the jab. Because you're the only person who can ultimately weigh that, that risk and decide if that's best for you and your family. But it shouldn't be mandated, especially with some of the stuff that we know. But now seeing this come down on some of these big city police departments, like Chicago's in a mess right now. They're fighting with their Fraternal Order Police Union. A number of other cities, they're seeing this in New York and elsewhere. It seems like a really bad time for that to happen. And we need more police, not fewer police on the streets. What is your thought about all of this? And how do you approach this issue?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. But yeah, you're exactly right. These large cities where there's a strong mayor, and we need to keep in mind they're ordering their police chiefs to do this, and they're ordering their agencies to do that. But you think about back when a year ago, these are the same mayors that wanted to defund the police. So is this just another methodology to actually defund the police when you have a third of the agency saying that they're going to leave the job, like in Chicago? That's incredible. With the horrific crime on the rise up there, I think it's going to take a toll on the citizenry, and I think it is just an awful mess.
Yeah, a horrible mess. I was reading an article just a little earlier this afternoon, Sheriff, about, I think this was looking at Portland and Seattle. No, this was looking at Seattle. It was from King5.com, their NBC affiliate out there. And they were saying that, after they didn't back the police with all the Antifa violence, and they had passed all these orders, that police were very hesitant to get involved and enforce because they actually were very unclear due to the language passed by city council what they could and couldn't do. And then, of course, there's these vaccine mandates that are hanging over everyone's head. And either people are walking off or they're retiring early, or there are just fewer people able to be recruited to join police forces. I mean, it's down all across the country. What are you seeing in your department, if you can say?
Well, we're still having a hard time to recruit, even though in Texas, and especially here in Tarrant County, the good citizens are always backing us. I know that they have our backs, and so does our officers. But still, because of the national tidal wave of people not liking police or slamming police over the last year, it's still very difficult to recruit people into this field. And again, those large agencies that if they see 2,000 officers or 3,000 officers leave, it will be absolutely many, many years before they have them replaced.
Yeah, many years, and it's difficult to. I could imagine. I've never run a police force, Sheriff, but I would imagine it's real difficult to build up an operation like that.
Oh, it is, and some of these police chiefs are really great people, and they have great skills, but I think they're under mandates that they are just not going to survive. And I've heard from several of those agencies, by the way, and they talk about, especially on the West Coast, that they have no power to do things. That they have, for instance, human trafficking units that can't go out and be aggressive in that, so they're not pitching in. So it's just an amazing wave that's happened across this country that people don't want law and order.
Yeah, there's a comment that we played it a little bit earlier, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. She was saying that it was for these police officers not following the mandate, it's difficult for them to go out and enforce the law if they themselves don't follow the law. But a mandate necessarily is not a law. This is not something that was created in the state house by the legislature and, passed or voted on by the citizenry and added and incorporated, is it? It's not really the same thing as a law.
It is not a law, and I think that her leadership ability is on a scale from 1 to 10 is a -8. And she's going to so badly impact her citizens with what she's doing because she's running off these cops. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, running off the police officers at a time when they least need it. Last question for you, Sheriff, and we appreciate your time with us today, too. I know that this is probably the fights over the vaccination mandate, et cetera, it's probably increasing. I just think that there are things that police officers, they're pretty good at determining, I think, by and large, risk assessment and what kind of risk they want to assume and figure out if this is the best thing for them. But considering the nature of your work, Sheriff, probably is not the thing that worries you the most when it comes to, say, your physical safety.
No, it's not. Is that certainly we make the vaccine available, and it's certainly a personal choice. We are absolutely and haven't mandated anything here and won't. But yeah, we're concerned about more other things. We're concerned about the rise in violent crime. We're concerned about the issues of officers being ambushed like we saw last week in Houston. Those are the things that are creeping up on us.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I'm pleased to have you, Sheriff, as always, my Sheriff, Tarrant County of Texas, Sheriff Bill Waybourn. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us, and Godspeed.
God bless.
Of course. All right, folks, coming up, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita. This is a really interesting story. He's leading 17 states. It's like a coalition of states now. Very interesting. Red states versus blue states now, as they fight to protect parents from the administration's tactics with CRT and domestic terrorism. Can't even believe that's a phrase that we have to use in this context. So the Attorney General of Indiana joins us next to discuss. The Social Security Administration's computer servers are 45 years old, and computer servers at Health and Human Services are 50. Maybe this is how cyber criminals hacked U.S. Census Bureau's computers, where everything about you is stored. The threat of some cyber thief stealing your credit card is not your biggest risk. Your massive risk is that they take ownership of your home. It's called home title theft, and the FBI calls it one of the fastest growing crimes. Criminals can simply hack into your vulnerable government, bank, or mortgage company servers where copies of your home's title are stored. And they can forge your signature, stating that you sold your home to them. And then they can borrow on your home and leave you in debt. And you won't know until collection notices show up. Protect your most valuable asset. Visit HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim. Use promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. So attorney generals of 17 states have formed a coalition to fight back against the Biden administration's targeting of what they call domestic terrorist parents. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita is leading the charge and says that the DOJ is trying to, quote, chill lawful dissent by parents. It's true. Attorney General Todd Rokita joins me now to discuss. Sir, good to see you. As always, it's been a while. So glad you're doing this.
Yeah. Yes, and my staff didn't tell me I have Dana Lash as the interviewer, so what a surprise.
Surprise!
Good to be back with you. My
Excellent.
boy, my 11-year-old boy and I were listening to you on WIBC last evening, and he's more conservative than I am, and he had not heard you yet, so he was like, well, who's Dana? And I'm like, well, she's great, and she's very conservative, and he said, oh, so she's Republican? I'm like, well, she may be, but more importantly, she's conservative. So we're going through all that now.
There you go. Oh, I love it. That's great. Good young man. Good parenting, Dad.
Yeah.
That's good. And, that makes you a domestic terrorist now.
Right, exactly my point. So we have 10,000 people or so a day crossing our southern border, each committing a federal crime. We have looting in our stores, and in California, you could take up to $1,000 and not have to worry about even being charged with anything. We have fires. We have people beating on our police. But this is what Biden and the left is worried about. They're worried about parents raising their children, and getting involved in your education is absolutely part and parcel of raising your children, which if you're going to run a free republic, you need the family unit. And they hate that. Their whole goal is, frankly, to divide the family unit so they can replace the family with the state. And that forwards them on. So way into the weeds there. But the point is that, we have 17 states. I'm thankful for each one of them. They're each leading, and they see the same problems we're seeing. And we just wanted to show parents that their right to demand transparency, their right to demand accountability, and they're going to have someone in their corner, at least in these 17 states.
And I'm so glad that you're doing this because, it used to be that politics, if you were going to get treated nasty, you had to be in politics, right? You had to be run for office. You had to be attorney general of the state of Indiana. Or you had to, go and run for some elected office. Now it is, if you are simply a parent and you want to be involved and have some say into what, not only where your children go, but where your tax dollars go. And what gets me is that this administration has used stronger words to describe parents, calling them domestic terrorists. But you can't you can't use terrorists as a way to describe our Afghan partners, as you know, over in Afghanistan. Our Afghan partners, they don't even do us the justice of calling us our parental partners. We're just terrorists all the same. Kind of a big disconnect there.
Yeah, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, we have he just let the Taliban take over a country that we've been fighting to keep free for 20 years, and within a couple weeks, he just let them walk right in before even getting our allies out. But when it comes to the Department of Justice, this is supposed to be their priority. So. Look, it's simple intimidation. We're not even sure what they actually can do, but this will go one of two ways. We'll either go into court with this ultimately, or eventually, or ultimately, I would ask the parents to make sure they involve their sheriffs. It's the county sheriff that might have the best relief here. And again, you have no right to be violent. You have no right to disrupt or stop a meeting, but it does, there's nothing against you speaking loudly. There's nothing against you being emotional. There's nothing against you showing up and being concerned. And that's not terrorism. So we want our parents to know that they have someone in their corner. Look, Dana, you and I mean, we can go into these public meetings, no big deal. But for some of these parents, and I thank them for being involved in raising their kids like they're supposed to, like we're all supposed to. But for some of these parents, they may have never interacted face-to-face with government before. And we want them to go in with confidence. We want them to go in educated on their issues and have a civil discourse, but not be afraid.
And not allow, as I know that you're backing these parents, to not have them feel this way, to not have them feel like, they can be treated horribly by, their locally elected officials, like their school board members. And for all the talk, we're talking with Attorney General Todd Rokita here, for all the discussion of parents raising their voices and that, there's a lot of bad behavior from a lot of these school board officials. We just went through this in my town, where and we saw it in Loudoun County too, where you had some of these school board members who were on a Facebook page that was jokingly referred to as Chardonnay Antifa, and I regretfully did not come up with that name. But we're calling them Chardonnay Antifa, and they're mean parents talking about doxing these parents that were objecting to some of this insane curriculum being proposed in their kids' school. Where's the accountability for some of these elected officials? Because once they get in there, it's really hard to get some of these folks out.
You're right, and here's where it gets hard. But this is all part and parcel again of running a free republic, if you're going to have one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get a lot of calls. Well, Todd, I'm glad you stepped in. I'm glad you did your parents' Bill of Rights and you outlined everything for us. Now this school board's not doing that, or this school board's not doing this. What are you going to do about it? And I don't have any direct jurisdiction over a separately elected piece of government. They do, and that's when they start shaking their head. Well, no one will help us. Well, no, we help ourselves here. And what we guys like me in government need to do, and people like you in the media, Dana, is make sure that we're calling out these things when we see them, and make sure people know what their rights and responsibilities are, and that lawmakers fill that gap with better transparency laws and accountability laws if they're needed in a particular jurisdiction. But ultimately, we put these people in these school boards, and we got to take them out. And my parents' Bill of Rights, the last right I talk about is the right to run for school board. And maybe more people need to do that.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And for a lot of these parents out there that are watching this, you can't outsource that. If you're not going to defend your kids, who's going to? You can't outsource defending your own kids to everyone else. And these are positions where every person, every common mom and dad, everybody can run. Everybody has a right to run for these seats. One other quick question for you on this too. I am fascinated by the coalition of 17 states, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a television commentator, and we were saying, very interesting here, 17 states getting together, some red states, and even though I will say the issue of fighting CRT in school boards has very much become actually truly bipartisan issue. But it is kind of interesting, 17 states facing off against the administration. Do you think we're going to see this to come with other issues? Because this seems very effective.
Oh yeah, and I'm happy to come back on and talk about some other things we're leading on. But for example, defending states' rights when it comes to the apparent and maybe imminent election takeover, the federalization of our election processes. We're leading on that. And my promise, along with many other states, has been the sun won't set in Indiana before we sue over that. Then we have the energy issues and even the immigration issues. Illegal immigration affects Indiana. It's not just as well as border states. We have fentanyl coming in. We have illegal aliens upping the crime statistics. We have a lot of injury, even though we're not a border state. So you see us as the first line of defense now, these like-minded attorneys general across the country, and maybe even the last line of defense. And it's different than being a member of Congress or a senator. We just don't press a yes or no button. We have a kind of what I call a legal gun and a knife in our bag, to fight back with in terms of investigations and lawsuits.
And there you go. We're going to be watching this with great interest, and I know we'll be talking with you again. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita, always good to see you, sir. Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Of course. Bye. All right, folks, this next story will anger you and disgust you. It's really sad. It's incredibly important that you hear it, though, so stay with us. Big tech is taking advantage of us, and while they mine, sell, and remine our data, they're counting their money and abusing our privacy. We're a product. So if you really think that your emails and your texts and your messages are private and safe from governments, hackers, and profit-hungry corporations, and look, I'm a capitalist, but let's ask before you share data. Think again, because this is where Secure comes in. Secure's emails platform is 100% private. It's Swiss hosted and has no ties to big tech companies in the US. And with Secure, there is no data mining whatsoever. This is what makes Secure different. So when it comes to security and privacy, Secure is simply unmatched. Now, there's a reason that Secure built their company the way that they did. So take a stand and take back your privacy. Use my discount code Dana, and Secure will only cost you $7.50 a month for full access, which is nothing. So visit secure.com today and create your secure email address and account. And don't forget code Dana for 25% off for the whole year. That's secure, SEKUR.com, promo code Dana for 25% off. This next story is so incredibly disheartening because it feels like it says a lot about where we are as a country. So a woman boarded a train in Pennsylvania on Wednesday and was raped in front of the other train car passengers, and no one did anything. And when I say that no one did anything, I mean they did not even call 911, according to not just reports, but also the surveillance footage from the closed-circuit television cameras. A man whom officials identified as Fiston Yoy had sat down next to a woman at about 10 p.m. on a train traveling westbound on the Market-Frankfurt line towards 60. I don't even know where any of this is. All I know is that Mr. Nyoy attempted to touch this woman a few times, says the spokesperson for the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, Andrew Bush. It's also known as SEPTA. The woman pushed back, and the suspect proceeded to tear off her clothes and then raped her in full view of all of the other passengers. Now, the entire assault lasted about 8 minutes. Timothy Bernard, the superintendent of the Upper Darby Township Police Department, said Sunday, quote, "I'm appalled by those who did nothing to help this woman. Anyone that was on that train has to look in a mirror and ask why they didn't intervene and why they didn't do something," end quote. And of course, there are reports that were confirmed today by police after they viewed that CCTV footage that said passengers had their phones up towards the incident, and they think that they were recording it. They haven't confirmed it completely yet or confirmed the footage, but if so, they could be maybe criminally charged, at least for recording footage. I know New York has a Good Samaritan law, but what came to my mind immediately with this story is our busybody culture, because every day we see people getting yelled at for not wearing masks. Especially like some of the footage from grocery stores or Target. How many of you remember the footage from Target where a man was following a woman around, intimating that she was a murderer because she had already had coronavirus, that she already had natural immunity, so she chose not to wear a mask. And he was saying it wasn't the same thing as having the vaccine, and saying that because she wasn't wearing a mask that she was akin to a murderer. How many times have you seen this? Videos circulated on social media of people harassing each other over some stupid, trivial face panty offense. Not even a real offense. We also watched mobs walk into restaurants demanding people raise their fists in solidarity with any kind of SJW cause. And we seem to be living in a society full of hall monitors. busybodies in your business telling you how to live. Where were all of these Karens on this subway train? Not a single person could be troubled to lift a finger in defense of a woman who is being raped in full view. Not even make a 911 call on her behalf. What does it say about a society that feels that women have to be disarmed because, you know, guns could hurt criminals, but we're not going to intervene if you're getting raped on a train, but we will yell at you if you're not wearing a mask or if we don't think you're vaccinated. Yeah, but here they're reluctant to stop rape of a woman in full public view. Maybe this time in American history, it's meant to test us. I don't know. I just think we're failing as a nation. No wonder aliens don't visit us. We'd be lucky if we got hit by an asteroid. We're discovering that we're petty, authoritarian busybodies, some of us are, who peek over our neighbor's fence to rat them out, who are constantly stalking people on social media to see if they live their life in a way that the lifeless apparently approve of. And then we all look away when real evil transpires. We look away when people are canceled because nobody wants to lose any of their personal capital. We lose our livelihoods due to mandates that don't have any full force or effect of law and violate people's bodily autonomy. And yes, even in this extreme case as well. It's a sad state of affairs. This extreme case, watch as somebody is literally raped in public. And so many people do nothing. They stay silent. For all the talk about collectivism these days, like we're all in it together and we're all doing our part for humanity. I don't think enough people have humanity anymore to even recognize when it's being violated. Really, I think these notions merely are just lip service. It seems to me that we've gotten really good at talking about being good. We like to look virtuous, but when push comes to shove, nobody wants to take any risk at all to themselves to do the right thing. We're just not in a great place as a people right now. Let's hope a story like this maybe serves as a wake-up call to all of those people who would no sooner scream at a woman for not wearing a face mask or not being vaccinated, but they stay completely silent when something like this happens. Awful. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.